Hello everybody, welcome to G4G here on YouTube. Today's background soundtrack is brought to you by the Wrath of the Lich King OST. Kind of an emotional soundtrack for me to listen to. In Legion, after you go through some intro stuff, you wind up back at Dalaran, and Dalaran is moved, and when I hear that beginning swell of the Dalaran music, it hits me. It hits me just as much as vanilla music does for some particular reason. So, for today's episode of Marvel Avengers Alliance, we are going to talk about boring stuff. That's right. The top generalists in PvP of all time. So, let's go ahead and jump right into it. This one is a tough one, because there really isn't a solid, good 5 on this. But we can work it out. So, number 1 is Rogue. Rogue came in several forms in her generalist stature. Her most popular version was definitely the Horsemen of Famine. And it was the infiltrator form of it. Nobody, if you notice, I don't even have the blaster form. Nobody really ever got the blaster form of Horseman Rogue over here. It just was, it was stupid. It really was. People always got the infiltrator version, and my god, she was an absolute beast back in the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse era. She had tremendous passives and was just really solid. Shortfall going out on all enemies, removing a beneficial status was perfect because it could even remove Mystic Shroud. Her Southern Hospitality was crazy, and it did actually used to cause the sun, although now it doesn't. And her Drain Essence, her Black Horse was wicked at the time. The only thing is that the AI used her very stupidly. If you gave her her personal ISO, which says she starts within the fray, it doesn't matter. The AI would use Black Horse regardless. So the best thing to do would be just to give her a morale boost and let her go to town. She was absolutely wicked, and she could definitely have a spot today, except for the fact that a bunch of her moves are classified as melee. All of them are, although some are classified as unarmed, which of course gives her problems with the Hugins Eye and draining and everything like that. She's also not stealthy after the infiltrator power goes away, so she is going to have to worry about getting tanked. After that, we have Nurkod. Now, some people do remember the days in which Mockingbird was quite popular. Mockingbird was one of those ones where you can build very, very wrong, and then she doesn't just seem that good. However, if you build her correctly, she was definitely a huge hitter and considered part of the anti-pesty meta. People like her and Havoc pre-nerf were definitely people who were able to take Pesty out of the field and kind of get it back to a level playing field back when Pesty was super popular. If you ISO her and set her up wrong, she just becomes a light tapper, but when she's set up correctly, she's really, really strong. Then, of course, she became a worthy and got 2 flavors, Tactical Nurkod and Bruiser Nurkod. For the most part, people went with Tactical just to get the extra turns. It doesn't really matter which way you go in terms of her ISOs, because she's only going to be a generalist, but Tactician Power was definitely one of the most popular. Up next, Spider-Man Noir. Unlike a lot of the other spiders that we got from the Spider Universe, Spider-Man Noir really has carved out a niche for himself. Never really liked Ultimate, but Doc Ock Spider, well, I did enjoy him, and I always thought he might show up with the kit that he had, but he never really has. Ultimate Miles Morales, I don't like him at all. I think he's just not really good. But Spider-Man Noir amongst all the other spiders that we got semi-recently, is really, really good. Not only can he carry morale boost, but he can carry another ISO. And one of the best ones he could do is hair trigger. So that his packing heat gun move, and his busting heads follow up. When he follows up, he has a chance to activate his own passives, which is Trigger Man. So he's often tied to people like Spitfire, Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Quicksilver, Union Jack, agents with all kinds of follow-up and interrupt gear. Also, he messes the meta pretty badly, where stealthy is normally a good thing, unless of course you run into a Heimdall. But Spider-Man Noir means any stealthy attacks that are directed to him can be countered. So that actually kind of flips things around a little bit. That's definitely three of the most powerful generalists in PvP of all time. Destroyer's somebody that we wanted to do good, but he never quite showed up as much as we wanted. He deserves a bit of an honorable mention in the fact that he is immune to so many things, including delirium, fear, morale, and psychic effects. Bio also, he's in a good spot to work counter to a lot of things in the meta, but nobody really seems to use him, and nobody seems to talk about him on offense, despite the fact that he can walk through so much, like Kurth items and Cloak and Dagger items, Black as Void, all those kinds of things he could walk through. He's pretty good for energy-based team-ups. He's sometimes used with Victor, and I think he's better in the hands of a player than the AI, but unfortunately Modern Destroyer just never quite, he just doesn't make the splash that you think he could, despite the fact that when you look at his passives, you're like, man, there's so much that he'd be good for. I honestly think he could show up quite well with Blue Marvel, because they both like energy, and they both like the whole incapacitation but exploit stun deal. These two are very similar, whereas Blue Marvel has a melee attack on the 1, and then a ranged on the 2, Destroyer flips that. Moon Knight is gonna be on the list. Nah, he's not. Moon Knight is somebody that a lot of people talk about, and he has the potential to be good. The thing is, he's just nuts. His schizophrenia can really mess things up, and the last thing you want to do is proc his Infiltrator version while a bunch of scrappers are on the field. He is pretty hardy, and he does have a almost Gambit level thing with the crescent darts and the flanked and everything. However, he's too hard to work with. Moon Knight shows up fairly well in other Marvel games, and is now appearing in Marvel Future Fight, and does a pretty decent job tanking in Marvel Avengers Alliance 2. And he's decent in Marvel Heroes, but Marvel Avengers Alliance 1 just hasn't maybe quite given him the love that he's wanted. If there ever was an EISO that let you control his forms, via his recharge, I think that would be phenomenal. But unfortunately, we just have to deal with this weirdness. Punisher is an honorable mention because he's somebody that can walk around any meta that's there, because he can change to any class. He really does like pressure points and can set up his battle van to exploit tons of stuff, even attrition, when you get the ISOs. He also has an almost Mockingbird level ISO that says he changes classes based on what's happening on the field. But again, Punisher's somebody who's not used too often. He is somebody who can definitely make some decent use of hair trigger, but then he's going to have to deal with the Deb, and the Deb is coming back thanks to Cloak and Dagger. Lots of people like Silk. Unfortunately, doesn't show up much in PvP. Lots of people like Taskmaster, but again, somewhat like Moon Knight, just really awkward to work with in PvP. Although he is somewhat decent with Pesty because all his debuffs get sealed in. Colleen is somebody that we had hopes for, but again, somebody who never quite materialized. She goes pretty good with Sweat's Daredevil, or Sweat's Devil, but didn't quite make the splash that we thought. Same thing for She-Hulk. The jury is definitely out on Blue Marvel. I think as people begin to level him, he may get some play. I think he works out really well with people like Heimdall, Jane Foster, and even Hyperion. Him and Hyperion are so similar, and they actually get tons of PvE benefits together. His antimatter blast is a huge hit, and his antimatter manipulation kind of takes the place of what Heroic Age Iron Fist used to be. This is probably why Hafe has been nerfed slowly and steadily over the last year or so, because I think they kind of knew they were going to bring some similar things to the field, and they didn't want to double up on it. So we've had 3 definites. We've had Spider-Man Noir, we've had Nurkod, and we've had Rogue. Those are 3 out of the 5 major PvPers, and the rest are just kind of honorable mentions. But let's bring out another generalist who did show up in PvP and is definitely worthy of being in the countdown, and that is the generalist form of Groot. Prior to Bruisers getting a lot of good ISOs, Guardian Groot, or Movie Groot, in his generalist form was definitely out there in the world. And he was doing a good tanking job back when the Guardians were popular. It wasn't always the Bruiser version that we saw. The generalist version was out there quite frequently. One of the reasons being is that he suffered no consequence of having a blaster on the opposite side of the field from him. Unfortunately, the Guardians died out, and as the ISOs got better and better, the Bruiser ISOs, like Elite and Big and Fast, really took over and pushed the Bruiser form a little more to the forefront. However, he definitely was pretty solid back in the day as a generalist because he just didn't really have the weaknesses that others did. So now we're at 4 out of 5. In all honesty, I'm kind of hard-pressed to find a 5th when it comes to generalist. There just isn't that many really good PvP ones out there. There are some who have the potential, like even Captain America has a generalist form. But aside from morale boost, all of the other class ISOs just tend to be a little bit better. I mean, especially now that Bruisers have pushed their way to the forefront, they definitely have proven that Bruisers can survive. Sure, you can run blasters counter to them, but Bruisers are in a really good spot right now, so they've kind of taken over some of what the Generalist did. Now, there is one last Generalist who definitely deserves a spot on the countdown. Even though he was more popular as a scrapper, Blue Suit Quicksilver, as a Generalist, definitely showed up in PvP. Back before level 15 was a thing and you could activate your class benefits, sure, we saw Scrapper Quicksilver. And he single-handedly changed the face of the meta, as he was the sole reason why infiltrators were run out. Infiltrators were actually made extinct thanks to Scrapper Quicksilver. But we definitely did see a lot of Generalist Quicksilvers back in the day, and he is the final one to round out the countdown for Generalists in PvP in terms of impact. So, recapping, we have Nurkod, Rogue, Spider-Man Noir being the absolute undisputed top 3 in the 5. Then we dip into both Quicksilver and Groot to round it out and give us an even 5. There are some honorable mentions to Taskmaster, Moon Knight, and Punisher, but they've just never done a huge amount of PvP. Silk, again, she was somebody that I think we wanted to, but she was a little awkward. The protect and the block, just weird. And the best thing to do for Silk is to feed generalized on the enemy agents. Now, Purge probably doesn't count, even though it's basically a generalized. I think it has to be a full-on generalized. She's kind of good in PvE, and if ASG hadn't taken the nerf that she did, ASG and Silk could be a force. But unfortunately, ASG was nerfed so fast, we never really got to see if Silk and Amazing Spider-Girl could do a lot. Blue Marvel definitely might make an appearance. If this is filmed 3 months from now, we might be talking about Blue Marvel, but we don't really know how the AI runs him yet. And on offense, there's definitely, he has a lot of competition for rising up buffs, except the antimatter manipulation is straight up Heimdall. You can definitely not bring Heimdall to a fight and bring Blue Marvel, and you get just as much of a guarantee of the buffs. His antimatter blast, from what I've seen in PvE, is absolutely good. And I actually really do like using him with J-Thor. Give him a neurotrope, or somebody else that can give him rising up with without him using this. He's pretty good. This is best suited not to give you buffs, but actually a big, gigantic Iron Fist level team heal. Unlike Cloak and Dagger, who's currently not restoring stamina, Blue Marvel definitely is doing everything he is supposed to be doing. He's got some decent ISOs, including a tactical protect, but that takes up a really, really good slot for him. You may not want to run that slot. You may want to do something else here like Sudarasu or the flanking one. Or if you're teaming him up with J-Thor, you could put the charged on this and then he could work with static charge also. His antimatter blast is definitely very strong, but unlike Hofund, this one has a cooldown. Along with Heimdall, he's probably the best initiator of rising up buffs in the game. Beats just about everything else other than him. So guys, there is the most impactful PvP generalists of all time. We can almost count Nurkod twice because Mockingbird was pretty strong back in the day. And definitely one of the things that was used to counter the Pesty heavy meta that we got when Pesty first came out. So guys, hope you liked the video. If I forgot any of your favorites, let me know in the comments below. Have a good one.